This week we meet Nick Payne, who shares his journey from banking clerk to becoming MD of SA Brains Brewery, the Welsh national treasure. He discusses the challenges and triumphs he faced in the beer industry, his transition into the gin market, and his return to Brains, where he has found his true spiritual home, revitalising the brand to be relevant for the next 140 years. Nick shares the importance of sports in business and how it has helped shape him as a leader. Finally reflecting on his career journey, offering insights on personal growth and the importance of being true to yourself. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Steve.
So, we're going to be talking about what could be mining your favourite subject, which is beer today, which is always a good way to finish off any day. And I'm going to make sure we talk about the rugby as well in a positive way. So look, you're now MD of SA Brains. It would be really interesting to explain to our listeners how you've got there, because as we've talked about in this view of today's society being very much about, I want to be an influencer, and they can start the next day. Most of the time you've got to graft and you've got to learn. So it'd be great for you to give us a bit of background of your career, of how you've ended up in this lofty position, nursing and looking after a national treasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not to make the job too big.
No, I appreciate that. So, so my career in beer started back in 1999. So I was working for Lloyd's TSB as a financial advisor, selling mortgages and doing lending, and I just realised I wasn't built for a 9 till 5 Monday to Friday working in an office, surrounded by red tape and process, and I thought there's definitely more to the world, and I had applied for a lot of roles over a period of time, and I went to an interview down at the Marriott Hotel, and Guinness were recruiting. So it was 1999. They were sponsoring the Rugby World Cup in my homeland of Cardiff, and I thought that, well, this could be fun. And it was quite funny because at the time Guinness was still seen as a sort of an older statesman's drink, and and I wasn't a massive fan of the beer at the time. But I went to this interview, and the sales director came in and he did a cartwheel, and he sort of just had this boundless energy and talked with so much passion around Guinness as a brand and what they were going to do and the type of people he wanted to work within his team. I just remember sat there, and I'm 24. I've been for loads of interviews and they're all stiff, and you're in a suit and you're sat there uncomfortable and nervous and wondering what the future holds. And I sat there and I just thought, my God, this is totally different. And it really resonated with me, just his energy and passion for the business and what he was doing. So I was fortunate. I started within Guinness. I was fitting Guinness taps. That's what I did. So through Rugby World Cup, I was in the what was the Millennium Stadium, now the Principality, fitting Guinness taps, and the surrounding pubs, putting Guinness extra cold in everywhere possible, so consumers could enjoy pints of the black stuff. And I did that for a number of years, and I ended up doing 13 roles. I was there for just over 16 years, and I did 13 roles across Guinness. They obviously merged and with Grand Met, and then formed Diageo, and it was part of this big global drinks business. So I worked across spirits, I worked across sales and marketing and technical, and just absolutely loved my time there. It was a great business, great people, really invested in people's development and customer centric. But as with all things, they sometimes run their course and doors open. And I was approaching my 40th birthday, and opportunities arose to go and join Marston's, which was going to give me more opportunity in terms of people management, but also seeing the other side of the business and being a composite supplier. So Marston's, massive pub estate, but also a massive brewer with huge heritage, but also worked across all the major players. So I went to Marston's, had 3 fantastic years there, learned a lot around people, I was looking after a team of people aged sort of 30 to 65, and everyone's got different opinions on their own development. But we ended up being one of the most successful teams. And it was because when I go in, I like to ask a lot of questions, and I like to go with my instinct, and I like customers to be the heart of everything we do. And I know a lot of businesses will say that, and they'll say, "Oh, we're all about our people and we're all about our customer." But I remember back in my Diageo days, I was looking after I was looking after a group of accounts, and it was the best job in the world. My job title was National Account Manager Party Space, and I looked after all the big nightclubs, the student unions, and it was great. I just spent my time out entertaining customers,
Luckily,
taking
you were
these
younger
customers.
then, yeah.
Oh, I was so younger, I could get away with it, and God, they were like vampires. They just used to stay up all night, but it was great, and we ended up having a really positive, successful 2 years looking after that account, and I won a global award. And my boss said to me, "Right, what account do you want to look after? The world's sort of your oyster. Everyone's talking about you within Diageo." And I said, "Give me Weatherspoons." He was like, "Why do you want Weatherspoons?" He said, "They don't like us. They're hard to deal with. They're commercially tough." And I said, "Because they're our biggest entree customer, and I love a challenge." And I said, "I want, not because of an ego, I want them to like us." I said, "But I want to understand why they don't, and what we can do." And I remember going into my first meeting with the buyer. It was a gentleman called Andy Towell, and we started chatting. We had a commonality in terms of rugby. He was a ref, I was a coach, and I was still playing at the time. We started chatting, and he started talking to me around what they really wanted to achieve, which was to be the number one retailer on the high street for beer quality. And he stopped me. He said, "This is really strange, Nick." He said, "Usually someone comes in from Diageo or one of the big players and just comes in with a laptop, opens it and says, 'Right, this is what we want you to do. This is what we're prepared to give you. Now let's go and do it.'" And I said, "Well, yeah, I could do that." I said, "Maybe I'll do that at the next meeting." I said, "Today I want to get to know you." And we had a bit of fun, and I didn't open a laptop. I just had my book open, and we wrote, and it just provoked a lot of conversation around him and the challenges he was up against and their business and what they wanted to do. And we come up with this idea of a Guinness quality drive, which is we would send mystery shoppers in, we would make sure that the quality on Guinness was absolutely paramount across every outlet. Um, and if they weren't good enough, we would fail them. And they really wanted us to fail them where it wasn't right. And long story short was I went back to the business, sold this idea in, so did Andy, and we came together. And within about 2 months, we were recording videos with their chairman, speaking around how important Diageo was and Guinness was to achieving this quality initiative, and we rolled it out. It went global, so it went across lots of customers, lots of markets. 18 months later, we won Supplier of the Year with Weatherspoons, and it was down to a lot of people doing a lot of work, but I still put it back down to that just initial conversation. That was me understanding that person in front of me, what was important to him, and how I could make his life easier. Because ultimately, if he opened the door for me, it's going to make my life easier. Spent a good amount of time then at Marston's. And again, I'm a strong believer that, and look, we all have times in our career where you have a bit of an up and down, or you feel that you're hitting a plateau, and you start looking on LinkedIn and looking in job adverts and what's out there. And I think that's healthy, because sometimes it makes you realise what a fortunate position you're in, but also what you
Yeah.
need to do to get to that next level. Um, but I was fortunate that someone at BrewDog contacted me and said, "Look, they're looking for a head of entree to come in. Would you be interested?" This is a time when BrewDog was in the press for all the right reasons. They were doing some amazing work. They were really driving and disrupting the beer market. And I thought, wow, do you know what? This could be a real exciting time to join a startup business. So I went across to BrewDog, spent 2 years there, worked with some of the most creative, amazing people I've ever worked with. Um, Again, hit a crest of a wave. Just everything we were doing was really exciting. It was at the forefront of the beer industry. We were being really disruptive. It taught me lots about working with very small budgets and being really scrappy and sort of holding everyone accountable for the pounds and pennies. And we got lots of activation away, but yeah, it sort of run its course. And again, I I had a phone call. I remember I was at a meeting with BrewDog, and I walked out, and my phone rang, and the MD at the time of Budweiser Budvar called me, and I'd met him at the Publican Awards a couple of weeks before, and we'd had a beer and chatted, and I'd said that Budvar was, this amazing Czech beer and this lager that I'd always loved, and my father-in-law had introduced me to it back in my 20s, and I said, I don't see it anywhere. I haven't really heard of it, um, and we had this conversation around how they were trying to challenge the market, and lager's saturated and massively competitive. And a few weeks later, he phones me and says, "Look, would you like to come and run the on-trade here?" Really got excited about some of the things we discussed at the Publican Awards, and I'd like you to come in and chat around your ideas. So again, just looking at a challenge, I'm working for this craft beer business. Everything's working. We're growing our team. We're doubling our numbers. Everything's fantastic. Why would you leave and go to a smaller business that is, in essence, struggling to get cut through? But again, I just, the challenge was there, and that's what drives me. So, joined Budvar in October 2019, and 4 months later, we locked down the world with COVID. And so really interesting. We had this grand plan to do this rebrand and this relaunch across the global Budweiser Budvar market. And obviously that got fragmented then and stalled and changed. But ultimately I was there 3 years, and we pretty much doubled the volume through COVID across off-trade and on-trade. And we turned that business into a really profitable business. We relaunched with an amazing brand campaign that talked around quality and glassware and provenance. And basically the message was, 9 out of 10 people drink lager. If you're going to drink one, drink the best one. And we feel this is the best one. And we got people doing, ultimately the Pepsi challenge. They start, right, we will try this beer. And oh my God, that is amazing. Why? And then we could bring them on this journey. So, yeah, it's spent 3 years there. Again, really happy, great team, loving life, growing a business. And once again, I should probably change my number. My phone rang, and someone called me and said, "Look, someone's looking to set up a gin distillery in Wales. They're quite famous. Would you be interested to come and run it?" I was like, "Gin? Oh, that's saturated. That's a tough market." Yeah. So no, I'm not interested. I'm happy. And they went, "Nick, take this call." Okay. So I took the call. Had a conversations with sort of an intermediary person who was telling me about this gin brand, and they touched on what it was like, and who they didn't tell me who was behind it. They just said, "Look, this is an ultra premium gin brand. It's going to be made in Wales. It's going to be really exclusive. We think we've got a great USP. We're not trying to take on Gordon's and Tanqueray and Bombay. We're going to play in this upper level and elevate people's gin experiences." So I said, "Right, send me the gin. Let's try it." And they sent me these two sort of jam jars of gin, and I tried it, and I was like, "This is amazing." I've spent my life drinking the world's best spirits and
quite
beer.
Good at booze, yeah.
I'm pretty good at this, and I was blown away. So I got introduced then to the owners. So it was Catherine Jenkins, OBE, mezzo soprano, global superstar in terms of singing, and her husband Andrew Levitas, filmmaker. He's made films. He's a social impact filmmaker. Recently, had just made a film with Johnny Depp, and they're sat on a Zoom call. I'm sat on a Zoom call, and I'm thinking, what the hell? How did Nick Payne from Newport end up on this call with these people asking them to come and run their gin business? And I did. And, I come off the call, and we'd had conversations, and, other people were in the mix. But I think, they told me that what resonated was I had a huge amount of hunger, huge amount of passion, drive and a real can-do attitude. And I always say to people, you can moan about things once or twice and then I don't want to hear it. Come with solutions. And I know that, again, that can be a bit cliched, but it's true. I think, the way I try and operate in life, not just in work, is, very positive, look at solutions. There's always a way round. And as you get older, you realize your gut instinct is it gets better. Yes, your mind, starts to maybe get more cautious, but actually, I come off the phone. I said to my wife, I said, right, I can stay where I am. I can stay in my lane and I can enjoy my life and it'll be great. Or I can roll the dice and I can go and run this gin business where I've got to start it from scratch. I said, in an industry that is really tough with two people that don't know this industry. And I said, all my head is telling me is, and my heart is, roll the dice, go for it. Because I think I'll learn more doing this than I will staying where I am. And even if only lasts 6 months, I'm willing to, I want to go for it. I think I can do it. And she just looked at me and she said, look, you'll do it or you'll die trying. And I certainly don't want you to, for that to happen. She went, but I know you won't let it fail. Go for it. I back you. And, and it's nice to have that support network. So I started. I'm still a shareholder. I'm still doing some work within the gin business. We took it into 4 markets. We took it across the whole of the luxury retail space. It's in some of the world's best bars and restaurants in the UK, now in Singapore as well. And it was, I stand by it. I learned more in that last 2 years than I've probably learned in the last 15, because there's a term, get comfortable being uncomfortable. I use it in rugby a lot and in coaching and in life, and I love it. And I love being uncomfortable. I love throwing myself into instances. My wife's very cautious, and she says, why do you love going for a job interview? And why do you like walking, presenting to 300 people? And I said, because not everyone has the opportunity to do it, and I want to feel alive, and I like that challenge. And it's like it in sport. I still compete in sort of like CrossFit, and I'm 50 this year, and people say, "Oh, you're too old for that," and that is a red rag to a bull. It's like, no, you're not. You get too old because you think you're too old, and you stop behaving like a youngster. And I'm not saying I wander around, on a skateboard with my cat backwards. But I certainly like to, I feel fit, I feel healthy, and I got lots of energy, and I throw that into work and my surroundings. But yeah, that's, so ultimately that's what I did. I got really comfortable being uncomfortable in that gin industry. And then again, my phone rang about 8 months ago, and the chairman of Brains, who I used to work with at Marston's, called me and said, look, Nick, we're going through quite a lot of changes. The business has been through a lot of change. We're chatting to a few people. We'd like to talk about coming in and running it. What do you think? And at first it was interesting. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having that conversation. I grew up as a young lad, getting off the train, going into Cardiff, smelling the hops, seeing Brains everywhere. In my 20s, they were on all the Welsh shirts when Welsh rugby was at its highest, and we were winning Grand Slams, and we were, producing British Lions left, right, and centre. I've always worked in the beer industry, and love Brains and Rev James and what it stood for. But I was also, that's a business that's been under the cosh for a number of years, as all businesses within this industry have. It's a tough industry, but they used to own all these coffee shops and hundreds of pubs. They didn't have that now. So I went in, had some conversations, and do you know what? Every conversation I had, this fire inside my belly was just burning of, wow, like, Nick, this is the challenge. And I got more hungry for it and hungry for it. And do you know what? It feels like through my career, I'm 26 years in this industry. I said I'm 50 this year, and it feels like all roads led to this point. Running a brewery 10 miles down the road from where I live as a Welshman, sitting in the brewery, smelling the hops that I used to, looking at pictures of Grand Slam winners, with a big challenge ahead of us, but a lot of love for an amazing beer, an amazing brand. yeah, I'm really excited by the future.
And that was it. You're home, but only at the
I'm home,
beginning of
yeah,
a home with the beginning of a new journey, though, by the sounds of it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Similar challenges to what I've faced in the past. Very similar. This is a beer industry. Okay, it's not rocket science. It's we're not changing the world. I said to you at the start of this podcast before we went live, which if you can't have fun and you can't build some great relationships with some amazing people selling booze, there's something fundamentally wrong. And I've loved my time. I've loved
Yeah.
it. And I still really enjoy it, and I've still got lots of energy for this industry, and it's right up against it. It's getting harder. External pressures, government pressures. Pubs closing. Margins within retail. The opposition in terms of competitors, people drinking less. It's getting squeezed left, right, and
It's a bit of
centre.
a perfect storm, isn't it?
It is, but it's still just an amazing place, and I keep going back to, what does the pub give you? Why do you go to the pub? Most of us go to the pub to socialise, to sit, have fun, and have great times, and most of us will reminisce and sit back and talk fondly of great times we've had, with friends in the pub, or in the garden with the barbecue, with take home beers. It's a social environment,
Yeah.
and even if you're not drinking, even if there's you're drinking non-alc, it still revolves around great quality beers, and it's exciting. It's a real exciting place to work.
It's there's so you've only answered technically one question. There's so much to unpack from it, and I love it because we've
Yeah.
done a lot in the booze trade as an agency. We work for Halewood up in Liverpool
Oh
for
yeah.
Crabbies. We launched Crabbies with those guys way back in sort of 2008, and I agree with you. It's a brilliant industry. Like you say, it's hard work, but it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, right? And it's quite interesting. The energy, you can feel the energy you've got for what you do, and you've been through so many interesting brands there. Do you think that bloke, and that you can maybe name him, that gave you that interview all those years ago at Guinness, nearly gave you permission to do what you do? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Martin Griffiths was his name. He's from Cardiff, and he was fantastic. He was a great guy, and we stayed in touch for a long time afterwards. I haven't seen him in years. I know he'll still be about, and he'll still be his usual extroverted self, singing badly at the bar. But yeah, I think he did. I think what was it? I've always been extrovert, very extroverted, and I talk a lot around self-awareness, and Diageo taught me a lot around self-awareness. Look, you're 6 foot, you're Welsh, you're really eager, you've got lots of passion and energy. It's around controlling that. And I still say to people now, look, 25 years ago on your development plan you have on your quarterly conversations, I had self-awareness on there. And it's still on there because I'm aware I'm still like that, and I give people the permission to rein me in. I think what
Yeah,
Martin did was say, look, if you have bundles of energy and enthusiasm, I want you in my team because I want someone motivated on a Monday morning who's going to wake up and go, right, this is how I'm going to get after my week.
yeah,
This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And this is what I need you to do, Martin. Not get up on a Monday and go, right, what do you want me to do this week?
yeah,
And I always say this to people when I interview them and they're coming in. I'm saying, look, I love challenge. I want you to challenge me. I want you to drive your own development. I want you to be accountable, but I want you to have that freedom for success. But also, I'll give you that freedom to fail, and that's what Martin gave. Is look, be yourself. Be energetic. That not everyone in his team. There was probably 20 plus in his team. There were typical, very quiet, analytical, studious people. There are energetic people. There are very ideas-driven people. but he got that balance, and he knew how to sort of pull on people's strengths and work that well within his team. And that's what I try and do. Is I can't be an expert in everything, and I certainly don't have all the answers. I'm humble enough to know that, but I like to bring in experts, within marketing, within sales, within production, and just say, look, let me create an environment for you to thrive and grow and be amazing at your job, and bring me on that journey. I'll challenge you and I'll ask you questions, but ultimately, I want you to be, I want to create an environment that will allow you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think that's what Martin allowed us to do.
Yeah, he sort of gave you a glimpse that you're thinking, I'm just started this career and he's give me some headroom, and that gives you confidence, doesn't it? It's brilliant.
Yeah, from an industry where I was sat in a suit in my own office in a bank in Newport Town Centre, which sounds great, but I felt so confined and restricted, and I wasn't being me. I couldn't be I felt I couldn't be myself, and that's one thing people talk around is, you be yourself, be authentic, be true to yourself, and sometimes it's easy to say, but you can't always do that. What I felt was Martin allowed us to do that. You've got to balance it, and it sounds like it was just fun all the time. It was hard work, but he created a team environment where if he phoned me on a Friday night at 11 o'clock and said, Nick, one of the Guinness taps has gone down in the busiest bar in Cardiff, I'd go and fix it. Whereas I'd come from an industry where if someone, had phoned someone at 1 minute past 5, could you go and do this? They'd say no, or they wouldn't even answer the phone.
Yeah,
so you could see it was, it was rewarded. It was hard work, but it was a great environment.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's just that whole journey. So look, you've been in role now since January, 3 months. Like you say, it's a challenging industry. Full stop. Is this industry, and then you've got Brains that has gone through since, what was it? We were at 1882 when it was founded. It's had its heady days. It's now got lots of annoying competition from all over. It's become a global drinks market, hasn't it? Never mind what's the competition in Wales as well. So what have you seen, and what's your focus? What's your 90-day plan? What was it? 100 days? We won't go to that.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there, because it is a global drinks market. My wife is a nurse. She was a nurse on the special care baby unit. She's a health visitor now. If we went into a pub 10 years ago, she would have said, I'll have a gin and tonic, and probably on the back bar would be one, maybe two gins, and one tonic. Now she'll say, I want that gin, I want that tonic, and I want that garnish, and there'll be 40 gins on the back bar. So people's repertoires have grown massively, for all the right reasons. People are drinking better, they're eating better. You just look at coffee. People choose their beans. So it's a complex market, food and drink, and you have to be relevant, and everyone's sort of vying for the same, pennies in people's back pockets. So coming into Brains, I had this view, a bit like when I started with Budvar, award-winning, amazing beer, loads of heritage, lot of love across the trade. When people try the beer, they love the beer, but is probably slightly behind the times in terms of where it's marketed, where it sits against its peer group, and some of the competition is maybe overtaken, or the industry is overtaken where they were. But also loads of headroom and lots of potential. So you come into the business, and one of the things I said to the board as part of the process was, look, if I'm coming in, we need to treat this business almost like a startup, because we don't have all that legacy. We've got the legacy of the brand, the award-winning beers, the love of Brains, the community centre of Cardiff and Wales and the UK. We've got Rev James, 140 years worth of history there. But we haven't got a pub estate. We haven't got, thousands of people anymore. We are state-of-the-art brewery on the outskirts of Cardiff and Cardiff Bay. with a small workforce, all still massively passionate, we've got to operate different, and we're a brand business, so we've got to give it a good go. We've got to invest behind a brand in the right way, and the board are fully behind that happening. So you come in, and the first thing I want to do is meet the people and understand. You always want to make sure you got the right people on the bus, and you're set up for success. And without a doubt, there's people there that have worked for Brains 40 years. And it'd be very easy in this industry, or in any industry, to look back at the heyday and talk of the good times, and now it's not so good. All they do is look forward. All they're saying all the time is, this is what we should be doing. This is how we could be doing it. Here's some ideas. We want to get it back. We want Brains to be a force for good in the community. We want it to be, the best brewery in the UK. We want to be known for having the best ales and, drive cask and quality. So it's great. So, the people, got the right people. We've got an amazing production and brewing team, got an amazing marketing team, got the best salespeople out there. We've got, absolutely focused finance team. So you look across the board and you go, right, we've got the right people in play. Are we giving them the best environment to like I said, to sort of be the best versions of themselves and us get the best out of them? Probably not. Some of the systems are set up for a big layered retail business. So you look at your IT, you look at your finance, you look at your production. So we've spent a lot of time looking at changes there that will give people the right tools, free up more time for them to be proactive, be more efficient, and just get the best out of the brewery, and our reporting, and give them the tools then to be amazing at their job. So we spent a lot of time looking at the process, the systems, but always the focus was the brand. So we've got great liquids. We've got a portfolio of beers across non-alc to reserve strength beers that we can put across any individual, any consumer, in any environment at any occasion. But are we marketing it to the right people at the right time? Probably not. So what we've done is we've gone out and we're in the process now of doing some qualitative and quantitative research with groups in Wales, the Borders, England, working with key customers to find out what they think of Brains, the business, the beers, our peer groups, the competition, Rev James. And what we'll get from there is a good holistic view of where we are, where we sit and what we need to do. And then we're going to work with a couple of creative agencies, and we'll shortlist down to one where we can form a partnership, because this is a 3 to 5 year project. This isn't something that happens overnight. So we can go to them and say, right, here's our portfolio, here's what people think of us, this is how we need to market to them. So, how we market Rev James, we want to look after our current consumer, the ones that love Brains beers and love Rev James, but we also got to recruit people in, and we're going to have to talk to them in different occasions.
And use different products in the portfolio to bring them through into the brand.
Exactly that. So that's the work that's going on, and the plan is we're doing that at the moment for a refresh to launch around September this year. So really exciting time. And then we'll work with key customers and consumers and focus groups and this creative agency on a plan that will create a strong foundation, and we'll build on that for years to come, and get this growth back and get Brains again back, being back to its heyday and being really competitive and really exciting and chatting to the right audience, which is the audience of 25 and beyond. And we're sharing this information now with key customers and events groups and organizations. And all they keep saying is, yes, this is amazing. This is what we want to hear, and we're behind you, and bring us on that journey, and we'll work with you to make this a success. And that's really exciting. So they understand we've got to operate scrappy like a startup.
Yeah.
But our legacy really resonates with them, and they want us to be this amazing brand. And not just that, I'm at a breakfast meeting in the morning with business in the community. So again, talking around how do we get Brains to be a force for good in the community and work with local organisations and help the communities we'll operate in. We're working with the teams, individuals around doing fundraising because, again, we want us to be a force for good across our people and making sure that we're looking after our people from well-being and support. So yeah, it's a big project. It was always there. It's now sort of a bit like what that Martin did to me 26 years ago. I'm sort of giving people that environment now to be really expressive and creative and entrepreneurial and take brains forward for another 140 years.
Well, that's fascinating because I've been lucky enough over the years to work with quite a few different what we'd call heritage brands, like you say, with great provenance that as people are starting brands now, they dream of it. And I think a mistake a lot do make is they just try and either focus on just the old customer or the new one at the cost and realise, no, if the brand stands for something at the heart, you can then flex it to bring people in through different products. Because like you say, the variety, even when we talk about beers, never mind getting into gins and spirits, if you talk about beers, the variety of beer now, I mean, how many core beers have you got? From looking, I could see nearly double figures in terms of core beers.
If you think of a journey, we could talk to someone at 18 years of age around No Brainer, which is our non-alc, great name. Yeah. Okay, we can bring them in with lager, Bayside. We can then sort of continue that journey into pale ales and IPA with Brains, SA, and Barry Island IPA. We can then bring them exactly. You bring them through their journey then into sort of SA Gold and into Rev James and into Cask. So you think of that sort of journey that an 18 to maybe 45-year-old could go on. Mm-hmm. We can Brains can be part of that journey throughout their lifetime, and then onwards, as they get older. So we've got that portfolio, but we probably haven't talked to that audience consistently over the last number of years. We've probably focused a lot around, the cask ale over 40s drinker, as opposed, the 22-year-old female who doesn't drink. So, that's what we've got to do is, this is what this quantitative research will allow us to do is, what do people perceive of us? Who are they rating that does this better than us? And what brands do talk to them? And then, you steal with a bit of pride and we can change. And again, how we talk to our current sort of heritage consumer will be different to how we talk to our recruitment consumer. And our portfolio allows us to do that. So we can be really creative and have some fun with it as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because there are a lot of trends and fashions, let's call it, in beer at the moment still. Yeah. Were started by sort of the BrewDogs and they've been taken up, and obviously Tiny Rebel and Brad and those guys there have really featured on that. And that, you can feel there's a change in the market again back to provenance a little bit more and the quality of the product now. Obviously,
absolutely. That was the original craft beer. If you look at cask regionally, you had all the great brewers. That's where it started, was cask. So BrewDog always wanted to try and get into cask. You mentioned Brad at Tiny Rebel. Kutch was a cask beer. A lot of these craft guys, cask is where it started. So if we can bring people on a journey into Brains and all roads lead to cask, ultimately that's what we'd love to do. Because I was with Mitchells and Butler and Loungers last week. Cask is huge for them. That's they want consumers going in and drinking cask. That's we've got to make it easy
to serve the product, isn't it? It's the product is best, and it's all about that. But it's interesting. We've had on the podcast the guys at Wrexham Lager as well. James Wright has been on, and again, it's interesting, different thing, and they've got some provenance they forgot about, and now, but it's there, isn't it? And it never goes. It's just about how do you present that to be relevant to the customer now, and they've obviously got this crazy Hollywood thing going on the side, but again, I think they're being quite smart in just saying that's just giving focus on the town. The town's got a beer and the main stand's sponsored by the beer. It's like this stuff ain't rocket science, but
no,
it's got to be good, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to the liquid. The beer's got to be good. You have great branding, but if someone picks that pint up or buys that bottle and it's not great, then you've lost them. And that's
Yeah,
something we always worked hard at Diageo on Guinness. Was they were really focused on quality, and that's what we're doing at Brains. Is our brewing team spends so much time and love getting this beer absolutely perfect. But once it leaves that brewery gates, it's out of our control. So what
yeah,
we want to do as part of this refresh and work with customers is really focus on the quality and make sure that that comes through. So if yourself, Steve Henry, goes into a pub on a Friday night and say, "Oh, I haven't had a pint of Brains SA or Rev James in years," that when you try it, it is at
you'll
the
go.
absolute optimum, and it's the best tasting, best looking pint you could possibly have. And you say, yes, that's why I love casking. You tell your friends, and they drink it, and that's what we've got to do. That's what we've got to bring to life.
My first pint of Brains was in Porthcawl. With one of my best mates from uni lived down there. We came down for Kevin Sevens to play rugby down there, and
Brilliant. Oh,
he
lovely
got us a
place.
night out before. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Oh, it's great. We take the dogs down quite often and walk on Rest Bay. It's a lovely place.
It is. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. So look, we spoke before we started recording, Nick, and sport is important to you. You're a rugby coach now. For your sins, you obviously got 5 minutes spare at the weekend to do it. How do you find that helps the current day job?
Yeah. So I suppose through my career, you learn a lot around sort of leadership and managing teams and different personalities and flexing your style, and you can go on lots of courses. But actually, if you play rugby or any team sport, you've probably been doing it from a young age, because what
Mm.
sport does is it brings lots of different people in with lots of stories, backgrounds from all walks of life, and it puts you together. And the British and Irish Lions talk about it. They take four countries that are smashing each other, and they've got to create a team out of it. And every team, every grassroots sports team does that. If it's hockey, football, rugby, whatever your sport, and I've always been drawn to team sports. My dad ran the local football side, and I grew up sat on the sidelines or in the change rooms, and just watching this camaraderie and just boys, guys who'd worked all week, and that was their outlet. And then I went into rugby. I stopped playing for a number of years, just because of family commitments, and then I went back when I was 30, played till I was 38, ready to walk away, and my kids started playing. So you're on the sidelines, you get brought in, you start coaching, and you do your level 1, then you do your level 2, and then I was invited to do my level 3. And then you're thinking, well, if I've invested this much time and effort into it, I guess I'm going to be doing it for a few years. So I went through and I took them from under 10s to youth and seniors, and then went back to youth, and then back to my original club where I played, Pill Harriers in Newport, which was founded in 1882, same year as Brains. And
As you say, all roads have come back to this
all
point, haven't
roads
they?
lead here, yeah. So maybe we won't be on the Welsh shirts, we'll be on the Pill Harriers shirts next year. Um,
Absolutely.
um, and look, what I've learned on that journey is lots of things. So for me personally, it's a great release. No matter what's going on in your life, if it's work, you've had a busy day, you go to the club at 6:30 on a Tuesday and on a Thursday, and that all gets left behind, and you realise, and it's a good way to release. So you get to run around with the guys. There's a bit of physicality. There's lots of banter, a lot of Mickey taking, but also there's a serious part, and with mental health and blokes talking more about that over, especially nowadays, and we've been touched in the rugby community far too many times um, um, by some tragedy that's happened because of people going through mental health, and you see the importance of bringing men together and getting them to talk. You see the importance of support within that network. How people need to be supportive. People have got young families and they're struggling. They've lost jobs. And boys have a whip round. It really brings out this great community spirit. You can see that this inclusivity and, bringing on the junior teams and the kids and the community and the female game. It just gives so much back to the community, and it offers so much as well. And I've seen lads, turn up at 13 years of age, really timid, maybe overweight, unfit, not, couldn't find their sport, and they've come to the rugby club, and within weeks they're different. They're outgoing. They really embrace, and that's what I love about rugby is there is a position for everyone. It's really all inclusive, and I've seen people thrive. I've seen them thrive then in school and in college and go off to uni. And I've seen people develop within the workplace as well. And so it helps me in terms of that release. It helps me understand a bit. It keeps you grounded. So you see people from all walks of life. It helps me understand sort of how to talk to people, when you've got to give people a kick up the arse and when you've got to put an arm around them. And it's helped develop me in terms of my leadership styles as well. And then there's things from work that is translated into rugby. So, a lot of businesses talk around values and mission statements and what they want to be famous for. And a lot of clubs do that now. And you can take those learnings back from the workplace into sport and from sport into the workplace. But I just love it. And my family are massively supportive. My 2 boys play rugby. My daughter will come and watch. My wife watches. And they're part of the club. And there's nothing but positivity that comes from sport.
I love it. It's interesting, isn't it, like you say, of how transferable both sides work for each other. And again, what's wonderful, especially when you're younger playing sport, you don't realise what you're learning for later in life, but you suddenly realise you can get on with people, you can work people out a bit better. And
and I tell you what it does. Is it allows you to be yourself. So you can really sort of rip the banner, be yourself, and there's some people have, got very, important serious jobs and stuff, but when they come to, they can just, you can see a weight come off their shoulders, they relax, be themselves. For me, what else it does is it allows you to have those honest, challenging conversations. So I've learned in work, sometimes you've got to have tough conversations with people, maybe around performance, sometimes redundancy, some, behaviour. But you're doing that every week because you might be telling someone that they're not part of that squad that's going to play this Saturday. Yeah. And again, what our phones and social media have allowed us to do is do that over message. And I won't do it, and I challenge my other coaches is, look, if we're dropping someone, Thursday you pull them aside in training, you tell them why. And that might be a tough conversation, but they'll respect you for it. And I've had 100%. Players over the years say to me, I didn't agree with you, but I get it, and I really appreciate and respect you having that conversation with me, not finding out on WhatsApp when the team has gone out, I've been dropped.
Or your mate says, sorry, you're dropped. You're like, what?
Yeah, that's it. And it's the same with work, and and that's something you need to do is sometimes those tough conversations are the ones you learn from.
And you've got to have it, and the longer you put these things off, obviously they fester and they get into a bad place, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah,
great. That's fascinating. So in terms of, you're right. I suppose if you were to look back and reflect a little bit, you've got this amazing challenge now. I think it's pretty clear what you've got to do, and I think you've got the energy for it. It sounds like you've also got the team around you, which is quite special, isn't it? Because I've spoken to a lot of people who've sometimes gone back into businesses, and there's a lot to do anyway. And then when you add in, I've got to replace this team, this, and this, you sort of like, you realise you can't get going for 6 months, a year, and by then, who knows? So it's like a fascinating challenge that you're up for. So if you were to reflect and go back to that young lad before he joined Guinness, what advice would you give him? Was it to meet Martin and make sure he interviewed you?
Yeah, 100%. I think the big one is I'd probably say that back yourself and don't try and be anyone else but you. And that's easy to say, but you've got to earn that. It's a bit like earning, I always give people my trust and respect from day one, but I get not everyone's the same and we're all different. And I think, as I've got older and I've failed at things and I've succeeded at things, it's never through a lack of trying. I always evaluate everything. So, if I go in and meet a customer, as soon as I come out and think, what could I have said? And I'll do the same after this podcast. What should I have said? Could I have
Why
said
didn't I
that
say
better?
that? Yeah.
Articulated better. I do it straight after rugby, after a game. And I'm my own biggest critic. So I think one bit would be I'd say, look, back yourself. You're doing okay, and just continue what you're doing. Be hard on yourself, and I probably would have walked away from more things earlier than than I had, and I think that's something. As I've got older, I've got braver in terms of being able to say, either I or we as a business or we're not doing that anymore. It doesn't feel right, and instead of flogging a dead horse and trying to salvage something, either because emotionally or there's history behind it, you just got to rip that band-aid off, as they say, and just say, look, let's stop attacking the branches and just hit the root, and we stop it. So I probably would have, probably two things. So, back yourself, you're doing all right, but continue to evaluate everything you do and be critical. And secondly is, if it doesn't feel right, make that decision earlier. But outside of that, I'm a glass half full guy, Steve. I'm very positive. We've been, as with everyone, you speak to everyone, there's tragedy all around you, and there's unrest, and it's easy to fall into that. But I try and wake every day really positive. If I go to the gym early, I'm there because the competition aren't there, and and someone else isn't out running at stupid o'clock when it's dark and wet, and I am, and it's sort of, I like to challenge myself against the wider world, and try and be better, and I think it's easy just to settle on, I won't go, I'll stay home, I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to challenge myself, I won't go for that job, we're not going to beat that side Saturday, and I'm not great with people who moan about stuff and are defeatist. I'm like, come on, we can do this, and back yourself and get behind it. And I try and drive that mentality as much as I can and just be positive. Because look, we're not here. We're only here once. You get one crack at it. Get one crack at it, and you've got to enjoy what you do, and you've got to have some fun along the way. And no one's led on their deathbed and thought, Christ, I wish I worked more or moaned more. So try and enjoy what you do, and make the most of every day. And that's what I try and do.
I think that's brilliant. I think it's interesting your point about moving on quicker. I think you do need, it's a bit like making mistakes, and you do need to have gone through the cycle a couple of times first, though, to realise, I hung on, I dug in, and actually it didn't get any better. I tried everything, and I think that's an experience one. But I think your first point, there's an interesting one that a lot of people are talking about. I suppose imposter syndrome, which is quite an interesting angle. But you've got to look, and it's interesting. You're when you went through your history, those people most of the time contacted you, and they are the ones that chose you to do the role. And as you can get some perspective in life, and this is like a bit of advice I think for everybody, it's like, if someone says, would you like this job, and are offering to pay you, then they believe you're good enough to do it, so it's up to you. Don't think, I haven't done it, I shouldn't be there. It's like, well, no, they wouldn't have offered you it if they didn't think you could do it. Now, you're not going to win at everything, obviously, we know that.
Steve, the balance of this is, it sounds like the door's just opened along my career. I have applied for hundreds of jobs. Hundreds of jobs over the years, okay, where I've hit a bit of a wall, or I've not enjoyed it, and I've been turned down for loads of jobs, and I've been for interviews for loads of jobs and been turned down. So but it's that you dust yourself off and you go, right, okay, but at certain times, and I'm a strong believer in fate, when that phone has rang, and sometimes I've turned jobs down because they didn't feel right, that the phone has rang, I've answered it, and I've had those conversations, and that's one bit of advice I give to people is, look, always have that conversation. It doesn't lead anywhere, but it might be that one opportunity that really propels your career or gives you a balance in your life. And but you've got to balance that out. You're going to be told no. It's along the way, and and that can be tough.
Don't
but
worry, your good lady wife will always keep you grounded, as you've already said.
yeah, well, she does. She absolutely does.
Oh, Nick, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you. Look, I wish you all the best with Brains. It sounds exciting. It's weird, isn't it? You think normally sometimes going into something that's gone through all those cycles, it's like going to be a bit of an onerous task, but it actually sounds like you say, startup mentality, all the provenance and history there. We'll watch this space. We'll see you on the front of Wales' shirts in a couple of years, eh?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Do
look forward to it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It won't be through lack of trying, and I've said that to everyone in the team is, we're going to have a bloody good go at this and throw everything at it. And the energy is there. And, people are telling us already. I was in an ops meeting this morning and our head of marketing had been in a couple of customer meetings and she said, customers are already saying, oh, we're feeling the energy. We're feeling it's good and we're excited. So great.
But that's what people want to be associated with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much and all the best.
Thank you.
Cheers.
No, really appreciate it. Cheers, Steve.